Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. It's my pleasure today to have back as my special guest the leader of the People's Party of Canada, Mr. Maxime Bernier, the Honorable Mr. Maxime Bernier. We'll be right back.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, please like the station if you can. Do as much as you can to support us. We appreciate it. And every time you hit that like button, we beat Trudeau's censorship and YouTube suppression. So, as I said, the Honorable Maxime Bernier, leader of the People's Party of Canada, is back with me again. It's been far too long, Maxime, but it's so nice to see you continue to fight for real conservative values, real libertarian values. And so where are things now with the People's Party of Canada? Obviously, you're going to be running again in 2025. Unfortunately, I very much wanted to see you win that by-election in Manitoba. I think it would have been a great thing to have you in the House of Commons to keep at least to keep the Conservative Party of Canada honest and truly adhering to conservative values. But so where are things with the People's Party of Canada right now?
Yes, thank you for asking, David. I'm very happy and very pleased to be with you this morning. So, for the People's Party, as you know, we are growing the party across the country. Actually, last weekend, I was in Alberta, Red Deer, and Calgary. I had the opportunity to meet some of our candidates and also potential candidates. Our goal is to have a full slate of candidates for the next election because we want to give the opportunity for every Canadian to be able to vote in line with their values, to be able to vote for the People's Party of Canada, and that's going well. So what also we are doing this August, we will have our conference in Ottawa, revision conference with our members, our candidates, and our organization across the country. So that will be a training conference to be ready for the next election. And we'll have also some special guest speakers. So that will be fun. That will be in August, the first weekend of August, August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Ottawa. So I'm looking forward for that. And I can tell you, the People's Party will be there for the next election. It's a little bit sad that the election will be only in 2025, maybe October 2025, but we will be ready. And so what we are doing right now is to build the organization, finding our candidates, and doing a training with our candidates this summer.
Is it is it frustrating? Is it frustrating to be out of power? Is it frustrating to know that you're probably not going to win the next election? You could be a part of the governing process, but you were a minister of foreign affairs, you were a minister of industry, you were a very important figure in the Stephen Harper government. Are you frustrated at times as being a fourth or fifth party in Canada? Are there days you wish you were back with the Conservative Party?
No, absolutely not. That was the best political decision that I took in 2018 when we created the People's Party of Canada, because as you know, David, it's a political party that is doing politics differently because, this party is based on ideas, real, free market conservative ideas. We created that party based on four principles: individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And all our policies are based on these four principles without any compromise. So, what I said at our first election in 2019, I said the same thing at the second election for us in 2021. So, we are speaking about the real issues that are important for the future of Canadians and the future of this country. And if, our ideas are not that popular when we are speaking about it, We believe that the more we speak about what we believe with passion and conviction, the more support we will have. And actually, if you look at the past, it happened because, our first election, we had 1.6% of the vote. The second one, 5% of the vote. And I don't know what will be our score in 2025, but I strongly believe that we'll do well. And if I look what is happening right now in Europe and in UK, the populist movement is growing. And Nigel Farage, for him, it took 7 elections to be able to be elected. And the good news, he was elected at the last general election in UK, and his party has 10% of the votes. So for us, because it's a political system, electoral system, where it's the first past the post, it's a little bit more difficult for a young party to have somebody elected. But our goal is to grow our percentage of the vote and to be more influential in Canadian politics. If we grow from 5 to 8, 9, 10, that would be a big success. But that's the average across the country. Actually, at the last election, the average was 5%, but in Alberta, we had 10% on average. So everything can happen. I will work hard to be elected at the next election, but the goal for the party is to grow, to to change the public opinion, and step by step. When I was speaking about mass immigration in 2019, some people are saying, "Oh, Bernier is a racist and xenophobe," and I'm saying the same thing right now. And a big chunk of the population agree with us on that. So our ideas are more and more, popular, and that's good for the party. That's why I strongly believe that we'll be able to grow from 5% to, I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10% at the next election.
Oh. Well, you mentioned Nigel Farage, the leader of the UK Reform Party. I found it fascinating that he said his inspiration for the name Reform Party came from the Reform Party of Canada, which was founded by Preston Manning, of course. And I actually worked for a Reform MP, Art Hanger, who was one of the finest men I ever knew from Calgary Northeast in those days. And I thought the Reform Party had principles. It had values that it adhered to. And of course, those values got watered down over the years through the Canadian Alliance, through the merger with the Conservative Party. But I did think Nigel Farage was saying what a lot of Canadians feel is we need a party that's really going to stick to its ideological foundation. It's not going to stray. Do you think conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is is sincere? And I'll preface this by saying I've known Pierre Poilievre for over 20 years. I knew Pierre Poilievre before he was a member of parliament. I actually knew Pierre Poilievre when he was a volunteer on Ezra Levant's campaign in Calgary, which was, of course, unsuccessful because Stephen Harper took that seat. But as far as I'm concerned, it's up in the air. And I have a lot of comments from people who say, I like what Pierre is saying, but I just don't know if he means it. What do you think, Maxime?
But speaking about the Reform Party of Canada first, you're right about the Reform Party. The Reform Party was a principled political party like us. And actually, I must say that 90% of our platform is coming from the Reform Blue Book. I've read that Blue Book. The Reform Party were right about radical decentralization, more autonomy to provincial governments, fewer taxes, a smaller government. That's that's all part of the People's Party of Canada now. So we are the principled alternative in this country. And for Pierre Poilievre, Pierre, is not a politician that is doing politics by conviction. He's doing politics by following polls and focus group. And I like to say that he's a follower in he's not a leader. Because he's following that public opinion that has been manipulated by the leftist media. and is afraid to speak about the real issues, like withdraw from the Paris Accord. Yes, he's saying hacks the carbon tax, but no, he will want to achieve the Paris Accord. He will impose more regulation on businesses, maybe another tax. So the problem is the Paris Accord. If you withdraw from the Paris Accord, you won't have to impose a carbon tax. Same thing on immigration. He won't speak about that. He's saying that, oh, we need to build more houses for being sure to be able to have more immigrants. We don't agree with that. The problem is mass immigration. He won't speak about that because for him, it is not popular in some very important ridings where he wants to win, to be able to have a majority. So the big difference with him and us at the People's Party is the fact that we don't look at survey and polling. We believe that the public opinion has been manipulated, like I said, and we have to inform and educate the population on the real issues. And we have a strong vision for a smaller government, a radical decentralization, lower taxes, and being part of that cultural war and defending our values against the woke ideology. I'm not certain that Poilievre will do that because he's not speaking about that. So, but I hope that Poilievre will be able to have a majority government, and I think he will because of that win in Toronto, St. Paul's, that by-election. The last time the Conservative was able to win that riding when Brian Mulroney had the biggest majority in the history of this country in 1988. That was the election on the free trade agreement with the U.S. So Poilievre is may be able to have a majority, and that would be a good news because I don't want people telling me in 2029 at the general election, oh, Poilievre was not able to do that because he didn't have a majority, so we need to give him a majority. He will have a majority. And I believe that a lot of people will be disappointed because I was with Harper when Harper had a majority in 2011. As you remember, in 2006, we had a minority conservative government, 2008, another minority conservative government. And in 2011, yeah, a majority government with Stephen Harper. But what is the legacy of Stephen Harper? Stephen Harper didn't do any bold reforms, because he was looking at the polls and focus group and he wanted to be reelected with a majority. So that's why Stephen Harper has no didn't do any bold reforms. So, and he was coming from Western Canada. So the Conservative Party of Canada is taking for granted the support that that party has in Western Canada. So with Poilievre, with a majority, yes, that would be better than Trudeau, but it's easy to be a better government than Trudeau. And I don't think that he will have the courage to do the bold reforms that we need in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm already seeing signs of the last days of the Stephen Harper government and the Pierre Poilievre opposition administration. I tried to interview 3 Conservative MPs in June, and the Conservative Party communications team came down and said, nope, no interviews. Can't talk to the conservative media. You might say something embarrassing. I'm sure that's what they said. But I was blocked. And it reminded me of the PMO under Harper, constantly telling their MPs what they could say, what they could do.
Yeah, and you're right about that, because Harper said to Poilievre, and he said that publicly at the Manning conference in Ottawa a couple of months ago, and Harper had a discussion with Preston Manning, and they had a discussion on the stage, and Manning said, "Oh, Stephen, do you remember when we were reformers? And we were speaking about ideas and policies, and Preston said Poilievre must speak about his platform, his ideas, and Harper said no, he doesn't have to say anything. He has to speak against the government. He's the leader of the opposition. He has to oppose. He doesn't have to come with a platform. And Harper is the one that is giving advice to Poilievre. So Poilievre doesn't have any platform. If you go on the website of the Conservative Party of Canada, you won't be able to find Pierre Poilievre's electoral platform because Pierre doesn't know what he will believe in October 2025. He will need to do polling and focus group to know that. So that's why Poilievre is not doing any interviews with you. And also, it's very rare that he will do an interview with the mainstream media. And that same thing for the MPs, because, it's just, against. And if he's doing an interview, he will have to explain a little bit more. Poilievre is speaking by slogan, and slogan that has been tested with focus group. So doing an interview, you cannot always repeat your slogan. You have to have a discussion about your ideas. And because Pierre doesn't have any ideas right now, he doesn't want to do long interviews. And that's why the same thing for the MPs, conservative MPs, the leader of the opposition. He is telling them, be quiet, we will win, and we need to stay quiet, and we'll be able to do what we want when we'll be in power. But I doubt that they will have the courage to do the reforms. Actually, I must say that Jordan Peterson said a couple of weeks ago that he will support Pierre Poilievre, that Pierre Poilievre will have a majority government. I can understand that. But he said also the Poilievre governments will be a disaster because they won't tackle the most important issues, the cultural war that we must do in this country. And I agree with him. I believe that Pierre Poilievre will be a good manager of a big fat government. I was in Alberta. I just want to end about that on that subject. I was in Alberta last weekend, like I said. Daniel
Mhm.
Smith. Daniel Smith was elected on a platform to have a pension plan, Albertan pension plan, like Quebec pension plan for Albertans. That was part of our electoral platform when she was elected. And she started to have discussion with Albertans about that. And she had a committee that did travel across Alberta, explaining and speaking about what will be an Albertan pension plan. So very different, and they will have more autonomy. They will be more independent, and so. But Poilievre said to her, "No, no, don't speak about that. I don't want you to promote that because I will be prime minister and I won't change anything." So what is happening right now? Daniel Smith won't do anything about an Albertan pension plan. So Poilievre is telling Daniel Smith not to go ahead with that idea. That was part of her electoral platform, and she's listening to him. So Poilievre is taking, like Harper, the vote of Albertans for granted.
That's a very interesting observation because, yes, that was very much integral to Daniel Smith's platform. And yes, she's backing away from it. There's no question about that. But in terms of the culture war, you are somebody who does not back away from the culture war. And I just wanted to highlight, I did a story on your post on X where you said that the new chief of defense staff, Lieutenant General Jenny KRAYDEN, is woke. And it's a woke choice, and she's obsessed with gender identity nonsense. So I'm just wondering if you'd care to elaborate on that.
No, no, you're absolutely right. The government decided to appointed her because she's a female, she's woke, and it's not because of of her competence. So now the RCMP is a woke organization, and they are not promoting people based on their values, on their merit. So that's not a meritocracy organization. And we need to have a police force that will have competent people who are in charge, and that's not the case. She implemented the DIE ideology, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's discrimination. That policy is discrimination against white men, competent, and they want to promote people not because they're competent, but because of the color of their face or their sex or their gender. So that's sad to see that our RCMP is now a woke organization. So it's too bad. It's a little bit like our Canadian forces right now. That's the same thing, but we need a strong organization, and that's we don't have that right now with the RCMP or with the Canadian forces. So that's why I was not shy to say the truth about her. She was promoted because she implemented the DEI policy in the RCMP, and she's a lady, she's a woman. So that's Justin Trudeau. Destroying our organization. He did that with the Canadian forces. Now he's doing that with the RCMP.
Yeah, you mean the Kerrigan has done that to the Canadian Armed Forces because it was Brenda Lucky, who of course was the
Yeah,
RCMP commissioner. But
yeah,
that
yeah.
was a disaster because she obviously was there to support Trudeau's gun control legislation. So I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Well, maybe I shouldn't be, but there has been no other criticism in the House of Commons from any Conservative member of Parliament, certainly not the opposition leader, about this appointment of Jenny Kerrigan as the Chief of Defence Staff. No complaints at all. But you know what else I found very surprising is that there has been no comment from Pierre Poilievre or any of his caucus members on former Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan. This is a scandal that the Globe and Mail unearthed.
Yeah.
And I think the headline says it all. Harjit Sajjan failed Canada and Canadians because during the evacuation in the fall of Kabul, he sent an order out that Sikh Afghans or Afghan Sikhs were to be rescued. And up to 100 Canadians were left in Afghanistan because of that order. Not a single bit of criticism, not a word of criticism from anybody in the Conservative Party of Canada. I reached out to the MP who is supposed to be commenting on this, and I have received no reply. Is this because the Conservative Party of Canada puts identity politics above the truth and above the operational effectiveness of the armed forces?
Actually, it's because, they don't want to speak about that because they think that, leftist and woke ideology is okay. Like I said before, I was speaking about the RCMP, but you're right. It's the defense, the head of the defense, but also the RCMP. I'm so mad about the RCMP. That's why I had that in my mind. It's
Yeah.
the same thing at the RCMP and the Canadian Forces. So now these two organizations are woke organization, and you had a minister in charge of our defense department that put people in line with his religions before Canadians. So that is what is happening when you have extreme multiculturalism in our country. We are telling people you can come to our country, keep your culture, keep your identity, don't be part of Canadian culture, and it's okay. So now you have a minister. For him, the most important is to try to save in Afghanistan people who are sharing the same religion, but they're not Canadians. So that's resources that must have been used to help Canadian citizens in Afghanistan to get out of that country. That's a big scandal. But actually, Poilievre is not speaking about that because he's pandering to to that community. Is doing politics, identity politics, ethnic politics, and that is destroying our country. For me, you're a Canadian. If you're a Sikh Canadian or Chinese Canadian or I don't know, Indian Canadians, that's not important. I'm not speaking like that. If you decided to come to Canada and you're a Sikh, for me, you're a Canadian. You're not a Sikh Canadians. You're a Canadians. You're not a Chinese Canadian. You're a Canadians. But for Trudeau and Poilievre, they are pandering to these ethnic communities, and now that's what is happening when you have the minister in charge of our defense department, the defense minister, he is more interested to do what is right for his religion and not doing what is right for Canadians. And our foreign policies is the same also. Look at that war in Ukraine. We don't have to be part of that by giving more than $10 billion to corrupt Ukraine government. We are doing that because Poilievre and Trudeau are pandering to the Ukraine community, and they are very influential in some ridings out west, and they want to be sure to win these ridings. So our foreign policies is based on gaining, having support and votes in some ridings. So our foreign policies is not in the best interest of our country and the security of Canadians. And so that's why it's sad to say, but we are the only national political party that is fighting for peace and prosperity and saying we don't have anything to do in Ukraine, and we don't, and I don't want to be part of this proxy war between the U.S. and Russia. So, but Poilievre and Trudeau on that war, on the defense and what is happening in our big organizations, defense and RCMP, are on the same page.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Ukraine. I've written extensively about why Canada should stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, and why this is madness to continue to talk about war with Russia, and how Ukraine could possibly be a member of NATO. It's impossible. And
Yes.
anybody with a clear head could tell you that. But yet NATO continues to talk about Ukraine being a member. Trudeau keeps talking about it, and Poilievre keeps talking about it. And I'm glad to hear there's at least one political party in Canada that sees the insanity of continuing this war in Ukraine, and how we're closer to a nuclear war than we have been since October 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And anybody who can't see that is delusional. And it amazes me that Poilievre will not even take a second look. I'm sure most of the grassroots in the Conservative Party oppose this war. I hear it all the time. Is that we don't want to send another cent to, and I call it the black hole of Kiev, because it's going. Any money that we send directly to Ukraine is going into the pockets of corrupt politicians and oligarchs, and the rest of it's going to the military-industrial establishment to make more arms, which are going to be destroyed on the battlefield. It is insane. So I'm congratulations, thank you for saying that. That wasn't even on the agenda today, but it is an issue close to my heart. I'm ex-military, and I'm saying it's time for NATO to either find a real mission or pass into history, because it no longer serves any realistic objective. So
And you're
thank you
right.
for.
And you're right about that, David. And I want to thank you also for speaking about it, speaking the common sense and based on the history and culture of our country. So yeah, we need to be out there and to say the truth to Canadians, and you're doing that.
Well, thank you. I want to finish with two questions. Trudeau's future. Every time I have an opportunity to ask anybody, do you think Trudeau is going to step down over the summer? I mean, do you think the pressure will mount, or do you think he's going to stay on as leader for the next election?
It's a guess. I can be right, I can be wrong. I'm looking at Trudeau and the Liberal Party of Canada, and I know that the Liberal Party of Canada will want all these establishment politicians and around him will want the Liberal Party of Canada to stay in government. That's their only role. So looking at the polls, they will try to put pressure on the Trudeau to resign. He still have time, contrary to what is happening in the US with Biden. They're putting pressure on him, but the time is running. But here in Canada, the election will be in October 2025. So Trudeau he still have some times. And I believe that we will know that maybe, in February next year. And if Trudeau resigns, that will be around that time. His party will have time to do a leadership contest with a new leader. But I think it won't do anything. The Liberal won't be able to win. People are fed up with that, and so they want to change. And my goal is to be there, also be part of that change and offering a real change to Canadians. So answering your questions, I believe that the pressure will be very high on Trudeau, and I believe that he may, yes, resign in early next year.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. It's a toss up. I personally think he will do anything to cling to power, but I don't think Joe Biden has that option. I think it's history for Joe Biden, and
I
I've
hope
been
so.
saying that.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for a couple of weeks. I can't see how he can possibly run again with his mental state the way it is. But Trudeau's ego will, I think, sustain him. His narcissism will sustain him as long as possible until reality sets in. But wanted to
Yeah,
conclude now.
that's well said, David. Yes, until reality. For him, he wish, and I'm pretty sure that he wants to stay there. His ego is huge, but depending of the pressure and the result in the polls for the Liberal Party of Canada, we'll see what will happen. I think that the pressure will be so high that he will have to resign. You think that his ego is so huge that he may not. So we'll see.
Yeah, I used the word about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, to describe what I saw as a phenomena, not just in Canada but the United States and in Europe, is that strong delusion. It's like these politicians just don't seem to get it. They don't seem to realize that they are managing economies that are crumbling. They have foreign policies that are in tatters, and they just can't see the reality. So, that to me is how these people cling to power. And for Joe Biden to stay in power this long, with the national media in the U.S. ignoring his problems, that he had to be literally led to a podium back off stage, that he identifies people in the room who aren't there, who are sometimes dead. He's incapable of finishing a sentence. It's delusional, and at least the U.S. media seems to have woken up to how bad things are. But I don't know if Canada's media is there. Of course, they're bought off to a large degree by Justin Trudeau. So, but I wanted to finish with Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. I have done extensive research, and I've written a lot of articles. I've done about 5 broadcasts about the Online Harms Act. As soon as that bill came out, I was waiting for that bill to come out. I knew it was coming. I knew the Liberals had spent about a year and a half with study focus groups on how to release this thing, how to put it out there in the public with the least amount of pushback. So they decided to stop talking about misinformation and disinformation, and they focused on safety. And the bill was supposedly all about making it safe for children. It was all about making child pornography illegal. Of course, it already is. It was all about making revenge porn illegal, but it already is. It was all about hate speech, but of course, hate speech already is illegal. And so when I saw this, I said, this is the most onerous, odious censorship law in the democratic world. It's worse than what they have in Scotland right now, because this is the only censorship potential law bill right now that actually has a thought crimes component to it, where I could be put under house arrest with an ankle bracelet because somebody thinks, hey, Krayden might be thinking something that's hateful. We better make sure he can't go on the internet and say it. I think it's the worst piece of legislation, but it's interesting to me that Pierre Poilievre didn't say much about it. I'm just trying to find this here. Where is it? Yeah. We didn't really get pushback from the Conservatives until they found out that it was going to cost $200 million in the bureaucracy. There was very little set up until that. Suddenly it became an issue because it was going to cost $200 million to finance all the government employees necessary to police this horrible system. And I didn't hear a lot out of Pierre Poilievre, except when he was at the Strong and Free conference. He did reference it and said he was opposed to it, said it was Orwellian. But there wasn't a single question in the House of Commons during question period, because I monitor question period every day. Not a single question about the Online Harms Act from any Conservative MP. Lots about stolen cars, lots about the carbon tax, lots about the other pet issues of this opposition, but nothing about an act that could destroy free speech in Canada. It will utterly destroy free speech in Canada if this bill is passed and not repealed. So are you, obviously the People's Party of Canada is opposed to this. Are you optimistic we can stop this bill before it becomes law?
Yeah, I think we can absolutely stop that bill becoming law. But speaking about Pierre Poilievre, the reason why Pierre Poilievre was not so active and speaking against that bill, it's because, like you just said in the beginning, the Liberals did a very good job as promoting that bill as, protecting our kids. And so I'm pretty sure that Poilievre did focus group and he saw that and polling about that. So people think that it's a good bill because it is protecting our kids. So Poilievre didn't want to go against the public opinion, didn't want to speak against that because he think that he will be seen as anti-kids. And so that's another that's another proof that Poilievre is doing politics based on survey and polling. So, and when they did some investigation, and the government said it would be very expensive with a new bureaucracy that will be in charge of that. Now, Poilievre, I'm pretty sure, with all these focus group and polling, said, okay, the money part, I'm pretty sure that Canadians won't like it, so I will speak against that bill because it's too expensive. So that's what he did. So Poilievre is doing politics based on survey and focus group. So I hope he will repeal that bill. He will have the courage to do that if that bill is in force before the next election. But you have a nice evidence and proof of how Pierre Poilievre is doing politics. Instead of fighting for what is right, instead of telling Canadians, it's a censorship bill, it's against our freedom of speech. We cannot go ahead with that bill. He didn't have the courage to tell the truth because the truth was not that popular. So that's the conservative. That's why I left the conservative and I said this party is morally and intellectually corrupt. They're only conservative in name. They don't have the courage to defend and speak about real conservative ideas and values. And by doing that, they're giving credibility to the leftist narrative. And that's what Poilievre did with that bill. So he found a way at the end to be able to speak against that by saying it's very expensive. We cannot afford that. So I'm against that bill. Instead of saying that bill will change our freedom of speech, will repeal our freedom of speech in this country. It's an authoritarian bill. We must be against that. That bill is like, being in the Soviet Union 50 years ago. So we cannot be an authoritarian government. But instead of telling the truth about that bill, he didn't do it. He didn't do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. The response had to be so much more aggressive and vigorous, and it wasn't. And I spoke to a number of Conservative MPs about that privately, and they all said they were literally shaking their hands, saying, "I agree with you, David. We need to oppose this bill in a much more vigorous way. I wish we were, but they weren't." And I think that's the point. And if we lose our freedom of speech, and I'm sure you would agree, Max, and we lose our democracy, there's nothing left. And that is the freedom of speech is the foundation of it all. I believe that. Even more than
Right.
freedom of religion, even more than freedom of assembly. If we lose our freedom of speech, we aren't a democracy anymore. And I thank you for the work you're doing to oppose this bill. And I've been surprised how little interest there is among so much of the public when people are out there. I interviewed John Carpe of the
Yeah.
constitutional group,
Uh,
and
yeah.
he was adamant about how we need to work against this now, because once a bill becomes into law, it's difficult to repeal because it suddenly becomes a vested interest for so many people. And that's been the case. Anybody who watches politics and government knows that once a bill passes, it's more difficult to get rid of, to repeal, because it's people say now it's a human right. Now it's
Yeah.
part of the Canadian Constitution, even though it's not. But
No.
people believe that. And so I think we have to oppose that more than anything else. And I've spoken about this with Neil Oliver from Scotland, where they've tried something similar, and it's proving to be chaos in Scotland now, with everybody accusing each other of hate speech. The
Yeah.
police are busier arresting people for hate speech than they are for armed robbery or killing or burglary or anything else. And it's absolute idiocy. But that is what this Liberal government has done. And it's, to me, if there's anything we have to fight for, it's freedom of speech, and that's unfortunately what a lot of Canadians aren't getting. But I want to thank you for there's so many other things that we could discuss, and we could go on for an hour here. And I want to have you back in the next couple of weeks to discuss the gender ideology, the success a lot of parents had to oppose the
Yeah.
Pride season, as it's now called.
Yeah.
And, we had 50% participation from children in schools across Canada in June who walked out or did not participate in the Pride flag raising ceremony. And I think that is just phenomenal, because Canadians are pushing back and
Yeah.
they're saying no. And they're not satisfied with the equivocal responses of the Conservative Party at times. And a lot of people say to me, just don't criticize Pierre. He's going to be the next prime minister. He's going to come in with one of the largest majorities in history, if not the largest. And he might beat Brian Mulroney in terms of the largest majority in history. He's en route there. But I'm sure, like yourself, who is there as an honest broker to keep these people at least talking about the right issues. I see journalists, especially small c conservative journalists, the need to keep pushing from the right to say that you need to talk about these issues. And I'm not going to give you carte blanche to do whatever you want. I'm not going to excuse you when you don't talk about these issues. I'm not going to say that's okay. It's all about politics and you've got to win that election. Because I've been there before. I've been through this before in the past. And if we want another Liberal Party of Canada, then that's one. That's two Liberal parties too many. But it means you don't have a true Conservative Party of Canada. So I think we have to keep pushing for
Yeah.
truth and for conservative values and libertarian values. And so thank you for fighting
And
against the Ukraine war. Thank you for fighting for free speech and against identity politics. Because I tell you, when I saw no response on the Harjit Sajjan scandal, I said, there they go again.
yeah.
There they go again, because they
Uh,
will not put truth above politics at times. And that is the legacy of the last conservative government. And that basically died of indifference
and
and
that's why
was
and that's
replaced by,
why Yeah, and
go
that's
ahead.
why, David, that's why we are there to keep Pierre Poilievre honest, to push him in the right direction. So, I will say to Canadian at the next election, look at the polls. You can see that you want to get rid of Trudeau first. Look at the polls. You can see that Poilievre will win with a majority. Now, it's a win-win. You can vote for us. You can vote for you. You can vote for a real conservative party, the People's Party of Canada. We will keep Pierre Poilievre honest. We will support him when he'll be a real conservative, and we will shame him when he won't. So it's a win-win. Without us, Pierre Poilievre will do like Stephen Harper did, will govern in the middle left, and he won't have any courage to do all the reforms that we need to gain back our country. But that's why we exist, the People's Party of Canada, to be sure that we'll have discussion about the most important issues for the future of this country, and being sure that these conservatives will be honest and real conservative.
And that's exactly why I wanted to see you win that by-election, because the Conservatives did not need it. It would not have made them closer to defeating the Liberal government, but it would have allowed for a stronger voice to keep the Conservatives honest in the House of Commons. And I think that's uh, why I wanted you to be there after that by-election. But hopefully you'll be there after the next election, because I think we do need this party to continue, at the very least, to agitate for true conservative values, and that's what you're doing so ably. So the Honorable Maxime Bernier, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Industry, pleasure to have this conversation today, and we will not wait another 8 months to have you back, because believe me, the comments I get from my viewers is, when is Maxime coming on again? Because they love you, and they want to hear where you are, what you're doing, and how you continue to fight for the real truth and the real issues that matter. So thank you for joining me today, Maxime.
Thank you, David. And yes, we'll be in touch when you'll be ready. Just contact my team, and that would be a pleasure for me to be back on your show. So stay strong and free, and we'll be together soon.
Thank you, Maxime.